I was 8 months pregnant when my husband Brandon invited me to the 15th anniversary celebration of his company. Even with my heavy belly, I spent the entire afternoon standing in front of the mirror, trying on dress after dress to find the one that suited me best at the stage. I finally settled on a navy blue silk maxi dress. Soft, flowing, enough to hide my large bump while giving me a bit of the confidence I was struggling to hold on to. I even curled my hair slightly, dabbed on some lipstick, and wore the earrings Brandon had given me for our second wedding anniversary. I knew none of it could truly mask the changes in my body, but I still hoped, just a little, that Brandon would look at me and smile like he used to. The party was held at a luxury hotel in downtown Seattle. As I stepped into the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers sparkled above, wine flowed into tall stemmed glasses, and laughter echoed the way it always did at a successful event. I gently held Brandon's hand. He wore the gray suit I once picked out for him, his hair slicked back neatly, his face glowing with confidence. In that brief moment, I told myself maybe tonight could be the start of something new for us, but I was wrong. The first person who came up to us was Abigail, Brandon's executive assistant. She was young, tall, with flowing blonde waves and a smile that looked glued to her face. From the moment we stepped in, she clung to Brandon's arm, laughing and talking as if this was their event. She called him Bran, lightly patted his chest, and tilted her head often, showing off her sparkling earrings like she was on display. I stood right next to them, yet it felt like I was watching a stage I hadn't been invited to perform on. No one around seemed to notice the unease in my eyes. They shook Brandon's hand, complimented him, glanced at me politely, then moved on. I forced a smile and raised my mocktail as if everything was perfectly fine. Meline, Abigail suddenly turned to me, her eyes shimmering, voice as sweet as honey, but I could hear the insincerity behind it. I hope you don't mind me keeping him for so long. I smiled politely. It's okay, I understand how busy your job must be. I just want everything to go according to plan tonight, she said, immediately turning back to Brandon, not even waiting for my response. Brandon said nothing, offering only a vague smile before listening to her gush about the new partners from Boston. I took a step back. Something in the air made it hard to breathe. I walked toward the windows, looking for a quiet place to sit. My belly felt heavy, not just from the baby growing inside me, but from the weight of being sidelined, forgotten in my own relationship. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling each small kick, a quiet reminder that I wasn't truly alone. But what unsettled me most was the way Abigail looked at me. It wasn't admiration or sympathy, it was the look of someone who believed she had already won. Smug, proud, calculating. And Brandon? He didn't seem to notice. Or worse, he noticed and chose not to care. I used to be the woman who made him blush the first time he saw me. We had weathered so many hard days together, shared humble meals, laughed over the smallest things. But tonight, in a room filled with lights and laughter, I felt like a faint shadow in the life of the man who once vowed to love me forever. I didn't know what would come after tonight, but I knew something inside me had shifted, and that feeling was unmistakable. I was sitting in a corner of the room, trying to steady my breathing, when Abigail appeared in front of me, holding a glass of red wine in both hands. "Meline," she said with that dazzling smile, her voice sweet as sugar but cold as ice. "I know you're pregnant, but one sip won't hurt. This one's special, imported from Napa Valley. You really should try it." I looked at the wine, then up at her. I smiled faintly and shook my head. "Thank you, but I'm not drinking right now." She tilted her head like it surprised her. "Oh, I forgot. But that's such a shame. I poured this one just for you. I've been saving it since the party started. You wouldn't want to hurt my feelings, would you?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was just enough for the people nearby to hear. I glanced at Brandon a few steps away, chatting with the New York partners, completely oblivious to what was happening. "Abigail," I kept my voice calm, "I really can't drink." She still wouldn't back off. "Just a sip. I've read red wine is good for your blood, actually." I was starting to get uncomfortable. I said, "No, please don't push it." Her expression darkened for a split second, then morphed into another practiced smile. "Well, at least hold it for me, will you? My hands are freezing." Before I could respond, she shoved the glass into my hand. Then, as I instinctively reached out, she accidentally nudged my wrist. The wine tipped forward, spilling all over her ivory silk dress. She froze, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Oh no," she cried, her voice echoing through the room, now growing quiet. "This dress was a birthday gift from my mother. It's custom made from Paris. How could you?" I was stunned. Every eye in the room turned to me. Whispers started rippling. Before I could say a word, Abigail began sobbing, loud dramatic sobs, then ran from the room like a child who'd lost her favorite toy. I just stood there, still holding the bottom half of the glass, wine dripping onto the carpet. The air grew thick and stifling. A nearby woman shook her head at me. Someone whispered, "Who spills wine on someone else at a party like this?" I turned to Brandon, hoping he'd step in, tell everyone it was an accident, that I didn't mean it. But he just stood there, expression unreadable, then turned away. Like he was ashamed of me. I don't remember how I made it out of that ballroom. My legs felt like they were moving on their own. I found the restroom, locked the door, and for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not over the dress, not over the wine, but over Brandon's eyes. Over his silence. Something inside me had cracked. I realized I hadn't just been humiliated by a cunning young woman, but betrayed by the man who once promised to protect me from everything. And worse, I began to wonder if this wasn't an accident at all. Maybe that entire performance had been rehearsed, and I was the only one without a script. When I stepped out of the restroom, the party was back in full swing. Music playing, people laughing, glasses clinking as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Behind me were whispers, judgmental stares, and a dozen twisted versions of the story already making rounds. I didn't go back to Brandon. I didn't wait for him to walk me out. I walked straight to the exit, hailed a cab, and went home alone. That night I lay on the living room couch, hand resting on my belly. The baby was still moving, reminding me that I couldn't afford to be weak. But for the first time, I felt unbearably alone in my own home. And I started to wonder, if I disappeared, would anyone even come looking? I woke up the next morning aching all over, like the nightmare from the night before had dragged itself into the daylight. Then the sound of constant notifications from my phone made my skin crawl. When I opened my social media app, my heart dropped. A short video, barely a minute long, showed me dancing in the living room, cradling my pregnant belly, swaying gently to the soft jazz Brandon loved. It had been recorded a few weeks earlier, on a night I tried to cheer him up after a long day at work. I wore a light long-sleeved tee and comfy cropped pants, my hair tied up, no makeup. I was smiling as I turned my back to the camera, patting my belly like I was dancing with my son. Beneath the video were thousands of comments, not words of encouragement, but raw mockery. Who does she think she is, a pregnant elephant putting on a show? Look at that, who dances like that, wearing that? Someone should remind her that being a mom doesn't mean losing all self-respect. Trying to seduce someone with that belly about to burst? I was frozen, every line cut through me like a sharp blade. I didn't understand. That video, only Brandon had it. I had never shared it with anyone else. Then a horrifying thought crept in. He was the one who leaked it. I got up, no time to change clothes, no makeup, I just needed answers. I just needed to believe something had gone wrong. Maybe his phone got stolen, hacked. Anything but him. The house Brandon and I shared was in a quiet neighborhood in North Seattle, the place where we once dreamed our child would grow up peacefully. When I arrived, the front door was unlocked. I stepped in and heard laughter upstairs. Sounded like his small home office was in use. I was about to call out to him when a man's voice rang out clearly, followed by a line that made my heart drop. "You really pulled it off, Brandon. Turned a boring wife into the office's best entertainment." I stepped quietly toward the half-closed door. Brandon's voice followed, calm and cold. "She danced like she was in some comedy skit. Who records something like that and doesn't share it? I mean, come on. Her belly looked like a balloon and she was still twisting around like a ballerina." Both of them burst out laughing. The sound echoed like a slap to my pride. I gripped the corner of the wall, my nails digging into the plaster. Brandon's voice softened, but the bitterness remained. "She thought a few little dances would make me stay. She doesn't get it. I've been over this life for a long time. A woman nearing 35, drained, heavy. What's there to hold on to?" Someone else chimed in, smirking. "Abigail's prettier, younger, sharper. That's your world now, Brandon, next to someone like her." I couldn't listen anymore, I just couldn't. Nausea climbed up my throat, I slipped away like a shadow, walking slowly but steadily, trying not to collapse in the middle of my own hallway. I used to believe that if something awful happened, Brandon would be the first to protect me, that he'd stand in front of me, shielding me from the world. But the truth was, he stood behind me and shoved me into the mud. I took a cab back to my old apartment, the one I lived in before marriage. It was empty now but quiet. A far cry from the cold glittering house I had just left. I sank into the couch, my belly shifted gently as if to comfort me. The baby was still there, still believing I was the safest place in the world. And for this child, I knew I had to stay strong. But that didn't make it hurt any less. In the silent darkness, I turned on my phone. My fingers trembled as I clicked another link. The clip had nearly 2 million views overnight. I watched myself dancing on screen, then looked down at my belly, where life was still growing. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't pain anymore. It was a sharp, undeniable clarity. I had trusted the wrong person. But I wouldn't let myself be anyone's joke anymore, not for one more second. I don't know how long I stayed awake. But when the first light of morning slipped through the curtains, my eyes were still wide open, frozen in place. That video was still up, with thousands of shares, countless laughing reactions, and comments like little daggers. Inside one of Brandon's company group chats, people had even edited my image from the video into cheap memes, adding captions like, "Dancer of the Month," or "When the boss can't keep his wife under control." One image read, "Pregnant showgirl, now touring." I slowly set the phone down. Numbness spread through every inch of me. At 10 a.m. I got a message from an anonymous account. It was another clip, footage of Brandon's office. People were gathered, watching my video together. At the head of the table sat Brandon, legs crossed, smirking, holding a remote like he was screening a comedy short during a lunch break. Abigail sat beside him, covering her mouth as she laughed, whispering something in his ear before bursting into louder giggles. I clenched my fists, trying to hold it together. But something had broken inside me. Not just trust, something deeper. Like the very idea of basic decency. That afternoon I went to an OB clinic on the outskirts of town, a quiet, discreet facility. I sat in the waiting room for almost half an hour, my hand on my belly, as if apologizing to the baby for the choices I had made. I once believed I would become a mother surrounded by love, anticipation, protection, but now, my child had become a target of ridicule, the result of a cold, lopsided marriage. "Miss Meline?" a nurse called gently. I stood up, but just then my phone buzzed, a message. From Brandon. "We need to talk, you can't keep acting out like this. Abigail cried all night. I don't want you to make things worse." I stood there, stunned. Me, the one humiliated, betrayed, exposed, was expected to be responsible for someone else's emotions? I stared at the screen, then turned back to the front desk. "I'm sorry," I said, voice still hoarse. "I need to reschedule. I need more time." I left the clinic walking slowly. For the first time I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew I couldn't decide while my heart was still bleeding from lies. That night I returned to the apartment. As I opened the door, I caught a familiar scent. Perfume. Abigail's. It still lingered on the sofa, along with a faint lipstick mark on the rim of a glass on the coffee table. Brandon walked out of the kitchen, surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" he asked, unable to hide his annoyance. "I live here," I replied coolly. "Or at least I used to." He stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "I texted you. We need to talk." "About what? About how you spread that video around like an office joke? Or how your assistant poured wine for a pregnant woman and blamed her when it went too far?" Brendan frowned. "You're overreacting. That video was just a light moment. People needed a laugh, don't you see? And Abigail, she didn't mean any harm." I laughed. "You're telling me I overreacted after your entire office mocked my body? After you projected my pregnancy as a punchline?" Brandon pulled out his phone, scrolled for a few seconds, then showed me a photo. Him and Abigail, smiling by a lakeside resort I'd never heard of, his arm wrapped around her waist. "What am I in your life?" I asked, not yelling, but each word hit like a stone. "You were everything," Brandon answered without hesitation. "But you changed. You're not the woman I fell in love with anymore." I nodded. "No, I'm just pregnant. And you? You never really loved me." I turned away, took the keys from my bag and placed them on the table. You can keep the house, but you'll never keep me. And as I walked out the door, I didn't look back. And that night I scheduled another appointment. Not with the clinic, but with the lawyer. Because this time, I was going to end everything. On my own terms. 3 days after my final conversation with Brandon, I received an invitation to his company's year-end party. The card was sent from the admin department with the message, "Dear Meline, we would be honored to see you at this special event. Let's reflect together on a memorable year." Part of me wanted to rip it up on the spot. But another part, the one where a few embers of buried dignity still lingered, whispered that I needed to go, not to hold on, but to face the truth. To confirm one last time that everything I once had was truly gone. I arrived at the party in a long-sleeved black dress, simple yet elegant. My belly was already huge, and each step felt slow and heavy. But I came. Alone. The event was held on the top floor of the Lancaster Hotel, where the city lights stretched beneath like a glittering carpet. Soft music floated from the ceiling speakers. Everything was polished, luxurious, and unnervingly cold. As I stepped in, curious glances and whispers followed me. Abigail stood next to Brandon in the center of the room, dressed in a bright red gown, her hair in a high bun, her radiant smile leaving no doubt about her sense of ownership. Just as I poured myself a glass of water, Abigail approached with 2 glasses of wine in hand, eyes sparkling like nothing had ever happened. "Meline, I wanted to offer you a toast," she beamed. "To clear up any misunderstandings, I truly don't want to hold on to any bitterness." "I'm not drinking," I replied calmly. "I'm pregnant, you know that." "Oh, just one sip, ha ha ha." "Didn't you dance in that video? One little sip won't hurt," she said loudly, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Some people laughed. Brandon stood behind her, silent. I set my glass down and tried to walk away, but suddenly a senior employee blocked my path, smirking. "Meline, I heard you used to be a dancer? The whole room's curious for a live performance." I froze, unable to believe what I had just heard. But before I could respond, the lights went out, and a single spotlight turned on, pointed straight at me. Then came the music. That music. The same tune from the video that had been leaked. I turned to Brandon. He still stood there, hands in his pockets, face blank like none of this concerned him. "This is too much," I said, my voice trembling. "Come on," someone behind me laughed. "We're just celebrating the company's most viral moment." I stepped back, my heart was pounding. The baby moved inside me, as if sensing my anxiety. "Stop it," I growled. "I'm not your entertainment." At that moment a hand spun me around. "Abigail. Oh, come on, you used to dance so well. One more time, let everyone enjoy it." I pushed her away. Her wine glass flew out of her hand, spilling all over my dress and the floor. A few people screamed, then laughter followed. My vision blurred, I staggered back, and then a sharp pain hit my abdomen. My legs buckled, a warm fluid rushed between my thighs, quickly pooling on the polished marble floor. I screamed in panic. "Brandon, I'm going into labor. Please take me to the hospital." Brandon stepped forward, frowning. "Cut it out, Meline. Are you really pulling this stunt now? Trying to steal attention again?" "No," I cried. "My water just broke. The baby—" But he just sighed and turned away. "Someone get her out of here. Don't ruin the party." I lay there, shaking. No one came, no one called for help. Nearly 2 hours later, a night janitor found me unconscious in a downstairs restroom. My face was pale, lips bluish. Panicked, they called an ambulance and rode with me to the hospital. When I woke up, it was morning. The nurse avoided my eyes. The doctor spoke softly, like he was afraid I'd collapse right then and there. "We did everything we could." But we were too late. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stared at the stark white ceiling, listened to the soft hum of the air conditioner like a tragic lullaby, and closed my eyes. Something inside me had died. And there was no one to blame but the man who once vowed to protect me forever. I left the hospital on a freezing early morning, the streets still cloaked in fog. No announcements, no goodbyes. I left behind only a discharge slip and an empty hospital ID bracelet removed from my wrist the night before. No one knew where I went, no one cared. I left Seattle on the last night train heading south to a small coastal town I'd once visited on a short trip years ago. There, no one knew who I was, no one had seen the video, and most importantly, no one knew Brandon Lawson. I rented a tiny upstairs room above an old bookstore, changed my bank account name, shut down all social media, and cut every tie to the life I once had. Each morning, I walked along the shoreline, watching waves kiss the sand, letting the ocean breeze carry away pieces of my nightmares. I didn't talk much. I just wrote, documented everything I'd been through as a way to remind myself I was still alive. And Brandon? He realized I was gone the next day, when he arrived at the hospital with a small gift box and a tired expression. He had no idea I had lost the baby, not until the nurse on duty that night, Linda, the one who saw me rushed in near collapse, looked him dead in the eye and said, "She lost the baby, and no one was there for her, not a single person." Brandon stood frozen in the hospital lobby. But his nightmare had only begun. 3 days later, back at the office, he happened to walk past the break room and heard Abigail giggling with a small group of colleagues. He paused outside the door, didn't knock, didn't speak, just listened, until her voice rang out sharp and smug. Who would have thought? Just one tiny pill and it worked better than I imagined. She nearly collapsed on the spot. Took me a whole month to find the right kind, the kind that triggers early contractions but leaves no trace. Someone whispered, "Wait, you put something in her drink?" Abigail burst out laughing. Let's just say, I gave things a little nudge. And gave Brandon his freedom, too. He was so tired of living with a gloomy woman who blamed everything on her belly. If a woman can't keep her man, she shouldn't complain. The whole room laughed until they realized the door had opened. Brandon stepped inside, his face white as a sheet. The laughter stopped instantly. "What did you say?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Say it again, Abigail. What did you do?" Abigail froze for a moment, then quickly regained her composure. "Brandon, I was just joking. Everyone here knows I didn't mean any harm." "Joking?" Brandon cut her off, his eyes cold as steel. "A woman lost her baby because of what you did, and you call that a joke?" Silence fell. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and held it up to her. The screen displayed a resignation letter, already filled out, just waiting for a signature. "Pack your things, now. And don't ever let me see you within 100 miles of this office again." "Brandon," she stammered, grabbing his sleeve. "Please don't do this. I didn't mean—" He shook her off and walked out, with a resolve he may not have known he even had. But that didn't erase the truth. He let me stand there, humiliated. He watched as the woman he once called his wife was turned into a joke. And worse, he believed Abigail. Until the very end. In the weeks that followed, Brandon tried everything to find me. He hired private investigators, checked traffic cameras, combed through hospital records, even reached out to old friends of mine he had never bothered with before. But no one knew anything. I had disappeared like I never existed. And during those same days, his company spiraled into chaos. The recording from the break room had been leaked. The press got involved. Investors pulled out en masse. Social media exploded with headlines about the heartless CEO and toxic corporate power plays. Brandon Lawson, the man once celebrated on the cover of business magazines, became the face of moral collapse and internal failure. Photos of him leaving company headquarters in a wrinkled suit, head down, were plastered across every news outlet. But I didn't care. I just sat in my small room in that quiet seaside town, sipping hot tea and reading an old book. Outside, the waves whispered ashore and the sea breeze rustled through the trees. I had lost a part of my soul. But I reclaimed the rest, my freedom. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take it away. Again. Nearly a year after I left, I started over in a peaceful coastal region in the south of France, a place where no one knew who I was and no one cared about my past. I rented a small house overlooking the white sands, living simply by baking, freelance writing, and sometimes illustrating children's books. Something I had always dreamed of but never had the chance to do while living with Brandon. I had learned how to smile again. Not because the wounds had healed, but because I knew I deserved peace. Until one autumn morning, as I was wiping down the counter in my little bakery, the bell over the door chimed. I looked up, and the world froze. Brandon. He stood there, thinner, gaunt, and nothing like the polished man I once knew. In his arms a bundle of dried lavender, the kind I used to love. His voice was cracked and quiet. "Meline, I finally found you." I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood still, hands clenched around the dishcloth, my heart as quiet as the sea at dawn. He sat down at a table without waiting for an invitation, and then he began to talk like the guilt of the entire past year had been waiting to spill out the moment he saw me. He told me about the night I left, how the company was shaken by the sudden disappearance of the CEO's wife during a media crisis. Then he told me how he overheard a conversation between Abigail and a close colleague, about how she had drugged my drink at that final party. "She just wanted to make you lose control, to make you look ridiculous. She didn't think it would go that far." Brandon looked down. "I fired her immediately, but it was too late." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "I lost everything, Meline. The board no longer trusted me, stock prices plummeted, the media tore me apart. I resigned as CEO, sold most of my shares. Now, there's only one thing left I want to do." Brandon pulled a thick folder from his jacket and placed it on the table. Inside were documents transferring his remaining ownership in the company to me. "You can do whatever you want with it, sell it, hand it off, let it fail. I'm only asking for one thing, your forgiveness. Even just a little." I touched the folder, not out of ambition but because I needed to know for sure that the thing that once overshadowed my entire life was now in my hands, no longer a threat. I looked into Brandon's eyes, for the first time in years. Forgiveness, maybe, but going back? No. Whatever love I had for you died the day I begged you to take me to the hospital, and you walked away without looking back. He lowered his head and I stood up and walked outside. The sky was wide and clear, soft sunlight spreading over the deep blue sea like a dream. I turned back and spoke softly, barely more than a breeze. "I'm not coming back. I don't need the company, or that past. I just hope this ends in peace for both of us." And then I walked away, every step severing another thread that had once bound me to pain. I don't know when Brandon left that town. I didn't need to. Because for the first time after everything, I was free. And for the first time, I chose myself. That spring I was sitting on the small balcony of a seaside cafe, a steaming cup of herbal tea in hand, when I received a message from an old friend who used to work at Brandon's company. The message was only a few lines, but it made my heart beat slow. "She's been arrested, her mother just died of a stroke, Brandon's whole company is collapsing." I read it again to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. She, Abigail, had officially been charged for illegally distributing private content and deliberately inflicting severe emotional harm. Her actions weren't just unethical, they were now classified as criminal under modern cybercrime laws. When police dug deeper, they discovered she had secretly collected, edited, and spread at least 3 private videos of me, including the one of me dancing while pregnant, and another from the hospital after the final party incident. But the part that shocked everyone most was what came after. Abigail's mother, a woman living in another state, had suffered a fatal stroke after reading the cruel online comments and public shaming directed at her daughter. I knew that price was too high, and I couldn't say I was happy or sad, just a prolonged numbness like the entire world had gone silent. As for Brandon, everything crumbled within months. After the truth about the videos went public, investors demanded a full audit of all internal communications. It was discovered that Brandon had shared private content about me in employee chats as a joke. Investors pulled out one after another, long-standing partners terminated contracts, and soon after, the company Brandon had built for over a decade declared bankruptcy. Worse still, the media swarmed the scandal. Brandon's image became a punchline across the internet. Memes, parody videos, and news stories analyzing the downfall of a failed CEO flooded every platform. From a man of power and confidence, he became a name synonymous with disgrace and collapse. A few weeks later, I received a letter by express delivery, accompanied by a bank folder. Inside were the documents for a transfer of $50 million, the remainder of Brandon's personal assets. Along with it, a handwritten note from him. "I know nothing can change the past, but if I can use the rest of my life to make amends, this is where it begins. I don't ask for forgiveness, I only hope you live in peace, true peace. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, next to my old journal and the newborn bracelet that was never worn. I didn't call him. I didn't text. From that money I used a small portion to start a foundation supporting women who've suffered emotional abuse and public humiliation, what I had once gone through. The rest, I placed in a frozen account. Untouched. A reminder that I could choose, but I didn't need to. That evening the sky glowed a soft shade of pink and orange. I stood on my balcony, listening to the waves crash gently like the ocean's quiet breath. Some wounds never fully fade, but time, in its quiet way, makes them hurt a little less. I haven't forgotten, but I no longer let them define me. My little café rests at the end of a cobbled alleyway in Provence, southern France. Its name is Rain. Simple, soft, like a melancholy melody I carried through life, now turned into a haven for souls needing healing. I am no longer Madeline Lawson. Around here everyone calls me Rain, the name I chose for myself as a form of rebirth. I repainted the café by hand, creamy white walls with hanging bundles of dried lavender, modest wooden tables, hand-painted mugs, and the scent of warm almond pastries each morning made it a familiar stop for strangers. And for me. Each morning I wake before sunrise, walk to the market for milk, eggs, and fruit. I no longer need someone to lead me through the storm. I've learned to walk on my own, scarred feet but steadier than ever. Sometimes unexpected rain drizzles down, not harsh, just a soft pattering on the old tin roof. I stand behind the coffee counter, listening to the rain with a tender ache in my chest. No longer sadness, no longer regret, just gratitude. For being strong enough to walk away from the darkest days of my life. I've never told anyone here about Brandon, or about the baby I lost. But near the cafe window, there's always a small rose plant, placed beside a sketch of two hands holding a fragile flower. No one asks, but everyone seems to understand. It's a space for something sacred. One day, a regular customer, an elderly Italian man who lives alone at the end of the street, said to me, "Rain, we don't need to forget our pain, we just need to learn how to live with it without letting it consume us." I smiled, knowing he was right. That $50 million Brandon sent? I didn't touch it. I transferred all of it into a fund supporting women who've suffered abuse and pregnancy loss. I don't need his money. What I needed I created myself. Peace, freedom, and pride. In the end, Brandon disappeared from my life like a summer storm, fast, violent, and leaving only ruin behind. He tried a few more times to find me, but he never found anyone named Madeline again. That woman died the night she lost her unborn child in the rain. Now, I am Rain. I live not for anyone else but for myself. And every morning, when sunlight pours through the window and glows on my chamomile tea, I smile. A real smile. I've walked through hell. And I came back, not just alive but brighter than ever. Madeline's story is a painful yet deeply inspiring journey of betrayal, loss, and rebirth. From a woman humiliated by her husband, manipulated, and left to grieve her unborn child alone, she rose again, choosing to walk away and rebuild her life. Though pain never truly vanishes, Madeline found peace within herself, something no money, status, or false marriage could ever give her. She is living proof that being true, free, and resilient is the greatest victory of all. What do you think about Madeline's journey? Did she make the right choice in walking away to rediscover herself? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional, powerful stories about life and family.